Hey everyone, my name's Tim, and this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Riverside FM. And before we get into it, I just want to take a few seconds to show you how I've been using some of Riverside's latest features to promote my podcast episodes and YouTube videos. Let's check it out. So what we're going to do for this example is upload one of my photography videos, which I created outside Riverside. And once it's imported, I'll select Generate with AI and Magic Clips. And then you can select the length, the speaker, add some topics to highlight. Within the text-based editor, you can also restore or remove any segment that you want. And you can also edit the captions as you like, in addition to which you've got access to all the other AI producer features. Essentially what this allows you to do is to quickly create clips of any long form video you have, whether you've created it in or outside Riverside. And that's going to be a great way to help advertise your long form videos and be more consistent with posting. If you want to try this out for yourself, check the link in my description and use the code MyTogBlog for a 15% discount. And now, on to the show. So like many creators right now, I've been leaning hard into trying to improve my video content, especially in today's highly competitive social media landscape. Video offers a great way to expand our reach while building a connection with our audience via short form video and enabling us to showcase our expertise via long form video. And partly because of that, if you can build an amazing portfolio as a video creator, there are lots of opportunities for monetizing your expertise as a video producer or editor. And so when I heard about the opportunity to speak with Jonathan Hayes, who is an award-winning video producer, I knew this would provide a lot of value to the audience. Jonathan has been executive producer of an award-winning documentary airing on PBS. And in June 2023, the company he founded, Mad Hat Productions, was sold to Ammunition, which is Atlanta's fastest growing advertising firm, where Jonathan is now executive video director. He's also certified in generative AI for advertising by the 4As, which is a trade association for the advertising industry consisting of more than 600 member agencies. In our conversation, we talk about how he built his video production agency, what it takes to produce great video content, what he looks for in hiring a video editor, as well as the role in AI in video content production, and so much more. So sit back and relax, and let's get into it. Hey, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on this.
Yeah, I really appreciate being able to spend some time with you. And I wondered if you could start out by just telling us a little about how you got into video content creation.
I think it boiled down to when I was like 12 years old. For some reason, I just really wanted my mom to buy me a video camera. So I had one of these old, basically digital 8 cameras, and I had a friend who was a really good rollerblader, like inline skater. And so I basically went around and filmed him. And I was doing my own editing from like VCR, VHS tapes, just trying to hit the record button, and I couldn't overlay music, so I had to play the music in the speaker. And then besides that, I got really lucky. I went to a public high school in Germantown, Tennessee that just randomly had a $3 million television studio.
Wow.
That with phenomenal teachers, like amazing mentors. And so pretty much from like freshman in high school, 14 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you're sharing this stuff before there was social sharing, creating it. And it speaks to the value of those educational resources and communities that help you get into this.
Yeah. Mentors are just so critical. I mean, if you have all the gear and you have all the equipment and the software, it can be really good from an experimental point of view, but having like proper guidance and mentors, not just to teach you things, but to keep you motivated and to give you like a bigger idea of what you're trying to accomplish is irreplaceable.
And so you had that experience in high school. Then how did you make the jump from there into doing it as a career?
Well, so I went to school at Southern Illinois University, and I immediately knew that I just wanted to just continue doing television production. So while I was going to school, I worked at PBS as well. We had an affiliate inside of Southern. And so I executive produced a TV show for 2 years. It was called Alt News. And that was pretty much, I felt like I was working and going to school. That's how I would describe it. And then through my high school alumni, I have a really strong alumni network. Some pretty well-known people ended up going there. And I ended up getting an internship at Turner. And so I went to Turner in Atlanta. I was born in Atlanta. So I had family there, and I did an internship, went back to school for a year. And then when I got out of school, I pretty much came back to Atlanta, and the people that I had met in my internship I was like, hey, let's work together. And
Right.
so that's where I committed to editing. Prior to that, I
Mhm.
was directing, doing motion graphics, editing,
All right.
sort of like a generalist to all things production. And then I pretty much committed myself to about 6 years when I moved to
Mhm.
Atlanta I was exclusively editing.
And were you working with Turner during that time?
Almost exclusively. Yeah, a little bit
Yeah.
of agency work, but I would probably say like 90% Turner work,
Right.
which was phenomenal because editing promos, which
Mhm.
is a lot of what I was doing, was, I mean, really fun and entertaining. I got to edit promos and work on some shows
Yeah.
that were very well known. So it was good to edit office promos and stuff like
Right.
that. But they had me cut and edit all different types of videos from like
Mhm.
sizzle reels to,
Mhm.
originally shot content. So in that kind of 6 year process, I got to work with all these different people doing
Right.
editing, all these different genres. And you don't realize it at the time, but you're really learning like so much on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. That must have been great. 6 years of experience in addition to what you're doing before. And then I guess at some point you decided you're going to launch an agency.
Yeah, or more or less a production company. So
Mhm.
while I was with my first company that I worked at, eventually after 6 years, I got the itch to start
Yeah.
getting back into production. I was like, I want to start directing again. I
Right.
want to start not just exclusively sitting at a computer screen.
Mhm.
And so we started doing production, and I had brought in a couple friends to work at the
All
company.
right.
In 2014, we decided, hey, let's open up our own shop.
Yeah.
And that's when we started Mad Hat. And it was phenomenal. We obviously had a lot of really good contacts to begin with.
Mhm.
We were just these like very hungry creatives,
Mhm.
and of course wanted to do our own things. Didn't really know anything about the business
All
side
right.
of it, but we knew like, hey, let's go in and, make good stuff,
Mhm.
continue doing that. And it was an awesome 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to talk about the ride you had there because I understand in June of last year you sold your production company, Madhap Productions, to Ammunition, which was then named one of the fastest growing companies in southeastern U.S. And you're now executive video director there. In doing that, like, what was the process like building that company, and what did you learn about the key factors about what it takes to build a successful video production agency?
Yeah. So I mean, where to begin? I would say that one of the things that was an embodiment of Mad Hat when we created
Mhm.
it, and this is, I would say it's representative of our careers as well, but
Uh-huh.
we never really liked committing to like being like a specialist in any sort of like,
Hmm.
specific type of content. So we
Interesting.
could be, and even like just the clients that we worked with. So we would do everything from national commercials
Mhm.
to editing promos with Turner or with Disney or any of these
Yeah.
TV networks. We would do some direct to client where we'd go in and do corporate
Mhm.
videos. We did a lot of interview and testimonials. I'd say on some level, and maybe it was like a bit of selfishness. Like everyone
Mhm.
I know that gets into the specialty categories, there's like a burnout phase to it.
Right.
So we just loved being able to be on set one day, being editing
Mm.
another day. And it sort of turned into this model that no one really anticipated, but I would describe it as like when we would start a project, because
Mhm.
we all had so many different skill sets. And that when we start a project, that we would be like the first people when you sat down with a client. It's like a group
Right.
of 5, 6 people. And at the end of the project, it's
Mm.
the same 5, 6 people.
Right.
We ended up kind of creating this flow of what we ended up kind of calling creative accountability.
Hmm.
And instead of getting passed on, it's okay, we're going to work with this
Right.
director, or this is going to go to this editor. And you have to, carry that ideation over, that we
Right.
were able to play those roles. And of course, we worked with other directors, we worked with other
Mm.
editors, but overall, the embodiment of it was that we ended up basically being like, we just love to wear many different hats. And that's why we named the company Mad Hat. And honestly, I
Huh.
think that's probably what made us so attractive to get acquired, because it's not super common,
Right.
at least in Atlanta, for production companies to get acquired. But we just had such a wide variety of skill sets and a wide variety of work
Hmm.
that going now to being at an ad agency where we're
Mhm.
basically doing very similar type of thing, we can meet all of these requests without having to necessarily raise our hand and say, hey, we don't know how to do this.
Yeah, very interesting because it's different than what you hear sometimes in business advice, which is niche down, right? And the riches are in the niches or what have you, where you're focused, but you've taken kind of a different approach. Why do you think it worked in your case to be more generalist?
That's a really good question. I don't think it was necessarily intentional. I think if there are
Hmm.
certain genres and there's certain types of videos that if someone had
Right.
said, hey, you want to do this forever, I would be like, absolutely. Like for me,
Right.
I've always been drawn to documentary style format.
Mhm.
That's being able to go in and sit down and interview and talk to people. That's probably like my
Yeah.
favorite component of the job. So it's not that I would say that we were intentionally going for it, but
Mhm.
I would say honestly, it probably comes down to just our relationships.
Right.
Almost all of our clients that we work with usually look at us in many different capacities.
Yeah.
And so for us, when someone calls and they say, "Hey, can you help me with this project?" Whether that's like, "Hey, we've got this creative, we want you guys to execute it," or like, "Hey,
Mhm.
we've got this video that's kind of stalled out. Can you guys help us with it?"
Yeah.
We kind of prioritize the relationships and wanting to make people happy.
I bet that makes a big difference, just being able to be someone's go-to. Like if they have a problem, they know who to call to solve it, as opposed to like, searching for those people like who is in this niche that can help us.
100%. I would say creative solutions are like a big
Mhm.
one. I think one of the most
Right.
exciting things about, I think, the video production process is that you could always have more money.
Mhm.
You could always use more money. You could always use more time,
Right.
and
Huh.
those natural sort of restrictions
Mhm.
always open the door for creative solutions.
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, we need 2 days of shooting, but we don't have the budget for it. Okay, well, let's do it. Let's blow it out on one day, and then let's do a small crew the next day,
Right.
and we can find ways of basically getting to the end result without necessarily sacrificing what was really important to the client.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see what you said about relationships being very important too, because when they do call a company, just knowing that company is actually going to solve the problem, as opposed to like, there's always a risk when you take on a project with a new company, a new service provider. You're not sure, even if they have good reviews, how well you'll work with them or how well they do, right?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty universal too, as
Hmm.
well. Just beyond, I think you could kind of apply that to any industry. I mean, we've been
Yeah.
around the block, obviously. It's the just having those trusted relationships and being able to call someone, knowing that like, okay, this person, no matter what
Right.
I throw at them, is going to be able to offer a solution, or even to be
Right.
honest enough to say like, hey, we can't do this. This isn't
Right.
our cup of tea. You should call this person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that sounds great. Was there a key turning point in building your company, and what do you think it was?
I would say that I could answer that on the big picture, like from a business perspective. And there's
Mhm.
definitely some things that definitely happened, that some projects that kind of helped launch us
Mhm.
and for clients to see us in a little bit different capacity. But I would say for me personally, the big turning point in the company is when I reinvested my time into the people
Yeah,
versus the
right.
work.
Hmm.
And I would say that in the beginning, I think in the beginning of the company, I did a lot more micromanagement
Mhm.
in terms of like trying to, let's say, hold like to a higher standard.
Right.
And I think that kind of evolved a little bit more into like, hey, let's put the people first. Let's
Mhm.
invest in the people and the time, whether that's training, whether that's just supporting them and saying like,
Right.
you got this. And the byproduct of that is then people become more motivated to do amazing and great work. And I think you could take the most talented person in the world. If you put them in the wrong
Mhm.
environment where they're not motivated, you're just going to see that work
Right.
output just go down. And the creativity. We're not in a business where
Mhm.
it's like, hey, I can just sit down and for 9 hours and accomplish something. It's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of failing, which needs
Right.
to be embraced. And if people feel supported to do, that's when you
Mhm.
see the best risks that are being taken.
Yeah, absolutely. But it must be challenging managing people in a creative environment like that. I may as well just ask this question now. Like, what happens when a project gets stuck? How do you unstick it to meet your
Yeah,
deadlines?
like if you run into like basically a creative challenge, I mean, in a
Mhm.
nutshell, and this does sound a little idealistic and it doesn't always apply, but I think embracing the challenge is
Right.
really a key component to it. Is that, I mean, they're always going to happen. There's
Right.
always variables outside of your control when, the actor doesn't show up on set on time
Uh-huh.
or something, just the equipment truck is late and all those different
Yeah.
things. And a lot of people can just get triggered from a stress point to that. But those
Mhm.
things always happen and we can't act completely surprised when they do.
Right.
So most of when we have creative solutions, usually to my team, it's like, hey, how can we kind of embrace this? How can we, deal with it? How can, we find a creative solution from that?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because you're right. Those kind of challenges, they're not a they might be a surprise, the specific one, but the fact that there will be challenges shouldn't be a surprise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And almost on some level, if you're not even like in whether you're directing or editing, when you get into that creative process,
Hmm.
if you're not finding those creative challenges like on your
Yeah.
own in the creative
Hmm.
process, you're probably not digging enough. There's always, and we haven't even talked about just the creative challenge of doing all of this work with the expectation of
Right.
pleasing somebody else on the other end, and
Right.
not just one person, but a whole chain, a hierarchy of approvals.
Yes.
And so when we go and if we're working with another agency or direct to
Uh-huh.
client, and there's probably like 5 to 6 different layers of approvals. And so being in that type of business, that first 2 rounds of revisions might be amazing. Like, hey, this is
Hmm.
great. This is awesome. And then the third round, or it gets up to the CEO, and the CEO is like, no, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let's kind of rethink this. So at some point, when you're kind of used to those
Hmm.
variables happening, at some point you just have to embrace it. Otherwise, you just end up with a bad attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the same kind of thing happen but on the side of research projects where, a lot of stakeholders, so random things will get thrown at you from time to time, and you just got to come up with those, like you say, creative solutions and yeah, embrace the process. So yeah,
Yeah.
love that.
What kind of research have you done?
Mostly like applied research to support public policy development. So that one in that kind of area, you can see where there's a lot of different stakeholders with very different perspectives, different outcomes that they want to see from a project. And the challenge sometimes is to how do we reflect what the research shows, but also take into account all these different perspectives that people have, that stakeholders have, that they want to see reflected and feel are important in the report while staying true to the research at the same time. Must be similar like with a film, right? You're trying to stay true to a specific certain narrative maybe or certain approach you've taken, but you've got all this feedback coming in from the outside that you have to manage.
Yeah, and like just a great example of that is just a video script,
Mm.
commercial script. And what's written down on paper is oftentimes brilliant, and
Yeah.
you get it with the right actor, and it might not be their own words. So
Mhm.
when I'm on set directing, and I encourage this for everyone on our team, is that get what's on paper, of course.
Yeah.
You want to accomplish that, and you want to let the client on set be able to check a box and say, okay, that's
Right.
great. And then give them, those actors, the freedom and flexibility of putting it in their own words, to dream a little bit and to just to
Right.
be yourself. And almost always, I'd say like 75, 80% of the time, you end up at a place where the piece just kind of evolves,
Yes.
and where everyone's happy and the client's happy because they've already got their box checked. And
Yeah.
then they're a little bit more open to hearing different things. And then of course you go back into edit, and that's like it's like a giant puzzle to begin with. So that'll carry over to us, like, hey, here's a version with what was scripted.
Right.
Here's what we think might be a little bit more natural form. And those types of creative solutions, it's getting there, but
Mhm.
getting there with also delivering on your promises.
Yeah, and I think what you said about digging is really important there because if you are putting something out, you're checking all the boxes, but you're not having those conversations. Everybody could be saying okay, but what you're producing actually could be fairly mediocre because everybody's just agreeing, right?
Yes, exactly. It's that's where there's a healthy amount of adversity that needs to be
Right.
happening. And some of that is variables you can't control, and other parts of that is that's your kind of your own self-motivation, where
Hmm.
that comes from.
Yeah, yeah. How can we make this better kind of thing?
Always,
Not like
always.
how
And
can we how can we get this done? How can we get it done, but do it better?
yeah, and now given there's sometimes where like we get certain
Hmm.
projects where I've had clients call that understand like our full capacity,
Right.
and they're like, this is one, it's just got to go and get done. And we can put that
Yeah.
hat on. We
Right.
can do that, but it's a rarity that happens. There's always usually some
Yeah.
place where you can spice it up a little bit.
Absolutely. So what's the one principle you'd share with someone who's just starting out with video content?
That's a really good question. I would say that there's always, like, from a skill perspective, I think if
Uh-huh.
you're getting into this industry, it's that we're in such an amazing time where like
Uh-huh.
the opportunities that I had when I got into high school were truly rare. We
Yeah.
didn't have these types of resources and the type of access to equipment. And I mean, of course, I think this is pretty widely known, but like the technology and the information has caught up. So anyone
Right.
getting into this has just a myriad of tools that they can play with. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I would say is play, have
Mm.
fun with it. Don't look at it like a
Right.
job. If you're getting into it, explore. I would always describe like, you're having fun learning when you sit down and it's like 7 o'clock at night
Mhm.
and then you swear an hour and a half has gone by and it's two
Yeah,
in the morning. That's when the real stuff is happening. And,
absolutely.
and where you just get to tinker and toy. I've
Mhm.
always had the mentality of any kind of software. I just go through all the menus and just click everything. Don't
Yeah,
always figure everything out, but that's that sort of like, oh, let me just press this button and press that. What happens? Oh, I don't get that.
exactly.
Let me Google search this. And then I think from a creative point of view, I would say that it's like flexibility of thought and being able to always boil everything back down to a
Right.
story.
Mhm.
That's something that's really important. When people ask me from like an editing perspective, like, hey, like, what's your approach to
Right.
editing? It all boils down to emotional resonance.
Mm.
You could pretty much pinpoint every piece of video content, at least in the most idealistic form of
Right.
like what somebody's intentions are, to have some sort of emotional resonance. Like, and
Yeah.
when people think about how can we emotionally communicate to people, you immediately think of like, oh, tears, like
Right.
how can we do that? But just even the feeling of getting somebody excited,
Mhm.
getting somebody to laugh, getting someone
Right.
to fear is obviously like a big one. It's not the one you want to wave your flag around,
Right.
but it's obvious that fear is a huge component of that people try to basically get emotional resonance from.
Yeah, and a lot of my audience are YouTubers and content creators. And what you said about experimenting, I think is so important, especially at first, because you're trying to figure out, I guess, what your main focus is going to be or what type of content you like to create, what resonates with your audience. And I think you do need to do some degree of experimentation to figure that out. So a lot of goes back to that niche down versus going broad conversation we're having earlier, because a lot of advice on YouTube or content creation is about niche down in order to grow faster. And I think that's true. But I also think you need time before you select that niche. Like you need that experimentation phase to figure out what it's going to be and where are you happiest creating along with what's resonating.
I
Yeah.
completely agree. And I think that your end of content creation being on YouTube is such a phenomenal platform just because you
Mhm.
have the ability to get feedback.
Right.
I don't know how many influencers that I've seen when you hear their story when they're like, oh, I started trying to do this and then it evolved into something else.
Yeah. Almost always. Right. It almost
Yeah.
always evolves.
And that's usually
Uh,
based on the feedback, what people
right.
are resonating with. And I think you put it really well said that if you can start a little bit more broad and leave yourself open
Mhm.
to be able to make those pivots. And then once
Yeah.
you get that positive feedback and then kind of focus and zoom in on that one aspect that was successful. But
Yeah.
it's a tough business out there. I love the fact for feedback, but it's obviously harsh out there.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta take all that stuff with a grain of salt, and then the other thing is about the skills building, experimenting to broaden your skills or deepen your skills. I really love that idea too, because so many when we're on YouTube, the other part of the feedback is the positive feedback you get, right? Like you produce a video, it does really well in terms of views or gets more likes than you normally get, and you think, "Okay, gonna double down and just keep producing more of that stuff." I think it's good to do that to some degree, but also if you're in parallel developing and broadening those skills so that you're not just always chasing the views, because at the end that runs its course at some point, right? And then you're gonna need something else to keep it going.
Absolutely. I've been toying around with a little automation on how I can
Mhm.
find like the best AI news resources basically.
Right.
And like Reddit is obviously such
Mm.
a real life one, but where it's very practical. And so I basically I have an automation set up to search for comments in
Right.
YouTube that specifically say, wow, or this is amazing.
Yes.
Cause that to me is an embodiment of emotional resonance. Anytime if
Right.
I'm in a comment on something and I'm saying, wow, like something has
Mhm.
really been impressive. So that
Huh.
positive feedback is such a great filter to actually get to new
Right.
tools and new practices that are resonating with audiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then when you're looking at AI and how you're using it, that's one example. What are some other ways that your company's incorporating artificial intelligence?
Yeah. So are you familiar with the idea of intelligent augmentation?
Oh, no, I haven't heard of that.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it because it's like I don't know, a less sticky version of AI. I mean,
Okay.
AI is so like all encompassing, but it's this concept that instead of using it to necessarily, hey, do this entirely for me, just take this
Right.
entire process and automate it, and people lose their jobs down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
more of about optimization of humanity with AI.
Hmm.
And I just recently, candidly, I just recently learned the term, but reading it, I was like,
Hmm.
this is an embodiment of what I believe
Yeah.
in terms of watching your AI video. I think that like you really said it really well, just talking about that I think it was when you were using like, when you were talking about vidIQ that,
Hmm.
oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about whether or not you should get AI to do like script writing for
Right.
you. And that's like the one part of it is that you can't sacrifice like
Mhm.
yourself in the
Right.
ideation process and not even ideas, just simply what you think. It's such an
Yeah.
important part of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think some creators or in the promotional materials for things like this, it's almost touted as like, this will make it easy. And like the dream is like full automation. But if you fully automate this, my question is like, why are you even doing it? Right. Like, I mean, I guess
Yeah.
in some niches, there's money to be made, perhaps, though I question how well so-called automation channels will do in the future. Those are those channels where like basically they're taking a topic like ancient Egypt or whatever, using AI to produce a video about it. It's totally AI content. It's AI
Mhm.
researched. It's AI images. It's going to be interesting for a while, but it's so easy to replicate that I think it'll just get watered down to the point that it won't be profitable anymore.
Yeah. So my prediction on that is that YouTube will eventually roll out a feature that you can do any searches, so you can basically filter the non AI content.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some AI content is really obvious.
Yeah.
It's funny when you hear people say like it's so easy to spot like the AI
Mhm.
altered photos or AI videos. Well,
All right.
it's easy to spot the bad ones. You know, there are ones that are getting through,
That's all right.
but there are other variables you can look at. Like there are a couple of YouTube channels that I subscribe to that when the channel's 6 months old and they're producing 5 hour and 20-minute videos a
All right.
week, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
like with the same voice, it's obviously this is a huge AI component
Yeah.
to this channel. And the knowledge of knowing that it's AI really takes away from the sincerity of the video.
It does. And I think the reason people are on YouTube or the reason it became big is like it's a way for people to actually connect with other kind of, I'll use the term regular people who are just making videos about things that they're passionate about. Right. And it's, I guess they call it parasocial relationship that you develop with these creators because you get to
Hmm.
know them. You get to like their content and the way they approach things, like their distinctive voice. And that's really the whole point. I don't think people are so much on YouTube to just get information or entertainment that is like, AI generated because it does, like you say, it takes away that sincerity aspect and that emotional aspect that you're talking about.
Absolutely. To answer your original question about how we're using AI, we always want to be very cautious. And when we're thinking about AI and automation,
Uh-huh.
they're going very much hand in hand for us when we're building workflows. But the big thing is how do you get relevant input into an
Right.
AI model? How do you
Hmm.
get, or for whatever task that you're doing? And of course, this is like, super popular. A lot of people are
All
doing
right.
this, but we found a lot of success with the idea of transcriptions. Transcriptions are mostly brought up with like, oh, let me like
All
record a
right.
meeting and let me make meeting notes from this
All
transcription. I'd
right.
say that's probably 80 to 90% of what I hear about with transcriptions. But
Right.
I find a lot of success with just being able to even just record just myself or
Hmm.
a conversation of one and two people. Like, hey, you have an idea.
Yeah.
Take for a video idea. If I have an idea for a
Uh-huh.
video script that could be relevant to a client, what
Right.
I'll do is I'll just go in and basically grab a room and basically record for 15 minutes. Like, hey,
Uh-huh.
here's just a bunch of different ideas.
All right.
Then I take that into a chatbot or a custom GPT model
Uh-huh.
that I built. And I'm saying, okay, now like this is the transcription.
Right.
Forget everything else you know,
Right.
everything. And then now help me like evolve this, help me take this to the next level.
Right.
Sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, this was a bunch of banter for 15 minutes. Let's
Hmm.
boil this down to a good little, director's treatment or a good just
Right.
treatment to help communicate the idea. And that is just, for me personally, is just given so much confidence because I'm not a talented writer. I don't do my best work when I'm sitting typing at a keyboard. I do my
Right.
best work when I'm thinking
Right.
and we can, and especially in interpersonal conversation, So that's probably a big way that we
Hmm.
are using AI right now, is just being able to human on the front,
Yeah.
human on the end. You need those
Right.
touch points on the front. And then let's let AI kind of help in the middle on the more mundane, trivial
Yeah.
tasks.
So kind of in a way broaden your ideation or contribute to the creative process, I guess, as a almost as a partner.
100%.
Yeah.
If there's like a little joke or something like that, that I have an
Uh-huh.
idea and I'm like, okay, this is a good video, but I'm really, this
Yeah.
middle section, oh, there's some issues there. I could just ask
Right.
the chatbot, give me 30 different ways that this could be improved.
Yeah.
And of course, 25 of them are just going to be like immediately dismissive. Three of them will be like, okay, that's all right, but I could have thought of that. And then
Hmm.
two of them will be like, okay, this is interesting. Let
Yeah.
me grab those two. And now let me kind of build on that and explore.
Yeah.
And then basically not just taking the idea, but let me, creatively exhaust that and then
Right.
add it in. And then you could even, maybe that will reveal another aspect of the piece that could be improved.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's two things that kind of scare people about this, and maybe they kind of cancel each other out because on the one hand, you look at, when you're using AI to generate things, there's possibility it's grabbing it from somewhere else, but you're talking about how you elaborate on it and expand it. But when just coming up with those ideas, one of the things I think that scares people is that that sounds like a person job, right? And so has the AI in your company, do you feel like it's going to replace people jobs? Or maybe it kind of answered this because you say how you need to take that input really and use people to work with it rather than just taking it as it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so, so much of it, there's, in America, there's like always that kind of guns argument that is
Right.
always brought up, like, are guns good or bad? Well, it depends on
Right.
who's holding it. I think that's kind of relevant to AI in
Right.
the sense that people are going to abuse it. People
Hmm.
are going to have those YouTube channels that they're just sending content out every single day, and it's going to be watered down, and it's going to lack humanity. And then there are
Hmm.
people that are going to be like a little bit more responsible about it.
Uh-huh.
And if I would say that whether or not jobs are going to be lost, I think that on some level, there's, of course, like history has shown
Right.
us that, like, when new technologies come out, when the
Hmm.
light bulb was invented, the candlestick industry
Right.
had some rough years, the cars
Right.
to the horse and buggy industry.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's so large and so encompassing, and it's
Yeah.
advancing so quickly that I think it takes a little bit next level responsibility. I think there needs to be some lines drawn in the
Uh,
sand. So how I would boil that down to, like, our
uh,
company is that we don't see people losing jobs. What
all
we
right.
want to see is we want to see people redistributing their time to
Uh-huh.
do the things that they enjoy doing more.
Right. Right.
And
That's
and for us to be able to make time for more creative process, for more,
uh-huh.
even take a job like a project manager, which is,
Uh-huh.
there's definitely a lot of automation that's coming in to
Right.
kind of mimic project management. A project manager is one of the most important roles at an
Uh-huh.
agency. They're the connecting thread.
Right.
So if we can give automation and AI, basically intelligent augmentation to a project manager, that
Uh-huh.
allows them to think bigger picture. That allows them to think
Absolutely.
more of about, how can we improve upon this?
Right.
How can I make these different roles that I'm supporting, how can I make them more effective at their job?
Yeah.
And having someone to be able to get away from, like, okay, I need to fill out this form, or doing a lot of this sort of grunt work,
Right.
and to be able to think more creatively in their job is, up to me, I think that's the future.
That does sound amazing. And having some experience with project management myself, I know like a lot of it is the key to the success of a project is what you're just talking about, the relationships with people and helping people maximize their potential, clearing obstacles for them so that they can do their work. But in practice, on the wrong context, project management can come down to fill in these 100 templates and figure out, provide a report to management about where the project is at in relation to all these milestones. But I mean, none of that matters if those relationships and the management of the people isn't being done well.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, the best part about, I think, all industries,
Uh,
and the best part of work in its most idealistic form, is like the relationships. Yet
mm,
at the same time, it's obviously the most challenging.
right.
We're all generally in like people industries. I
Yeah.
think that is just how, if I'm giving feedback on a project, that, like, when
Mhm.
I understand this now more being at the agency now. When client feedback comes in, how you interpret that feedback and how you
Mm-hmm.
pass it down to someone who's going to be executing it
All
is
right.
extremely important.
Yes.
And just in how things are phrased and
Right.
how it's, and honestly, if we get like a bunch of notes on a project, which
Yeah.
can happen from time to time, we like to pride ourselves that generally speaking, we like to come back with very little feedback, but
All
it's
right.
inevitable. And sometimes you get a lot of
Sure.
feedback. And just, if you take that feedback and you're like, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be
Right.
done, and there's no exceptions about it. That's what the
Right.
client said. You eliminate all creative solutions.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes that solving, items, revision notes 1, 5, and 7 eliminate the need that the problem, why the problem even existed in the first place. Notes, 2 and 4.
Yeah, and helping people interpret the feedback to understand it or see it in the broader picture. So, like, yes, it might be a lot of comments. Doesn't mean you did a terrible job. It means that there's this bigger picture. There's probably often other reasons why there's a lot of feedback, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So, talked a little bit about this in terms of what creators need to be mindful of when using AI and struggling with like that. Just how do you avoid ethical dilemmas when using it?
Yeah, I think that's a question that frankly I don't 100% have the answer to on any sort of a mass level. But how I try to avoid the ethical dilemmas is really just, again, it sounds cheesy, but kind of staying true to yourself and true to your
Yeah.
process. I'm chairing our AI committee at our office, is leading all of our implementation. And through my certification process, like the governance and risk aspect of it is
Right.
like incredibly important. So I think that with AI, taking it slow, I think is a
Yeah.
really good suggestion, and taking your time and doing it right, especially on an organizational level, is
Right.
pivotal. Right. I mean, I think it took 12 years for cars to basically get really implemented
Right.
to our society. So I would say to people just getting into AI, it's easy to feel like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, I'm so far behind and we have
Right.
to do this so quickly to catch up to other people. But welcome to the club. Everyone's
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I like what you said about taking it slow because it is there are so many unknowns and there's no real principles out there except in the most general sense in terms of like how to guide this. But in terms of I think the best practices are still evolving, right? So there's not as much that you can draw on in some as you can in some other areas, say project management, you can go back and it's a lot of principles to guide what you're doing there, but there's so many new things being created that you don't want to be the case study of why a new best practice is developed by doing something wrong, right? So I think that's why
Yeah.
you have to be is taking it slow, but also advancing at the same time. Because the thesis of my other video was that you can't, as a creator, you can't completely ignore AI and pretend it's not there. You've got to start learning it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, outside of the things that we talked about, like vidIQ, do you have like a large language model that you prefer to use?
Yeah, like I use Write Sonic, which is built on ChatGPT, but I tend to use that a lot for summarizing stuff that I've already produced. I was looking at another program, which is like a YouTube script writing program. But every time I've worked with a script writing program, whether it's within vidIQ, whether it's Write Sonic, whether it's this other one, I haven't found that it produces the kind of content that is natural to me. And so I find it actually is more effective to use it like the way you were saying, like to ask it questions or to say, I need 10 ideas for this, or what are 10 ways that video creators can create better content. And you might, like you say, you might throw out half of those, but then you've got, okay, there's these other things. I want to explore this more deeply. And you drill more into that and you combine it with your own research so that you're not just relying on the AI model. But I find if you're doing all that, it's actually easier to approach it from the top level and say, like, this is the story that I'm going to tell based on my unique experience, and then use AI to help fill in or help flesh out that, or see if there's anything you haven't thought of that you might want to incorporate, as opposed to like, I've actually found it very inefficient to try and say, come on, AI, produce a YouTube script for me so that I can make that process more efficient. I don't think you can make it efficient and good that way.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I think a big gap that from an understanding perspective and really managing people's expectations is
Hmm.
that how to look at AI and actually understand what's happening
Right.
under the hood. That
Hmm.
in some ways, like artificial intelligence is kind of a bad name because
Right.
AI, until we get to AGI, is really not intelligent. It's just
Right.
able to just experiment 300,000 times in a quarter of a
Yeah.
second. That idea, if you like get it to write a story and you were to put up
Hmm.
AI against, a human and say, write a story about a boy going to the convenience store
Right.
to buy groceries. The humans are actually much better at doing that. And if you
Right.
took one attempt, artificial intelligence, like a large language model, can
Hmm.
process that like hundreds of thousands of times in the internal iterative process. And that's how it can get to something that to our
Right.
eyes, it's like, oh wow, that's really cool that it was able to do that. But
Yeah.
in fact, we're actually significantly more talented. It's just taking just words and just putting them
Right.
together over and over and over.
Predicting how they should fit together, and
Yeah.
then that's what it produces. And I know that some people have shown how you can continually refine something with AI. You get to develop an outline, then develop some paragraphs, and then refine those paragraphs and get it better and better. But I think you're spending so much time going through that process. If you've got good writers, they can still do it more efficiently.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a talented team of writers at our agency across many different departments and, people that kind of embody that writer's mentality. And there's
Uh-huh.
like no doubt about it. So many times where I've just start off something and get like whether it's a
Uh-huh.
social spot or something like that, seeing what they'll start with. And
Yeah.
then if it was something like an AI blueprint and then where they
Right.
end with, it's so far out of the capability of AI. And
Yeah.
that's where they're actually the ones that going back to that idea, is it going to replace jobs? Is that there's that idea that to give editors, for an example, like video editors,
Mhm.
that whole idea, they'll say that editors aren't going to go away, but editors who don't utilize AI will.
Right.
It's almost getting cliche because you could apply it to so many different things, but
Mhm.
the take like the really talented writers at our office,
Yeah.
them being able to in their own way optimize I think
Mhm.
can not necessarily get them to a better product, but I think it can get them to their own personal
Right.
standard faster.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it, and that's probably a good chance to ask about video editors because I know, like, a lot of people who watch the channel and they produce YouTube videos, they'd also like to become video editors working for a company like yourself. So what is it that you look for when you're hiring a video editor?
Whenever we hire anyone, their portfolio is going to be very
Uh-huh.
important. But like when it comes down to sitting down and like talking to somebody, the talent and the work is at that point a given. And that someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be like high profile work. Like I've seen really talented people. You can see it in their work at the end if it's
Right.
lower, I don't want to say lower end work, not high profile, and
Yeah.
you can see the talent there. But the talent is generally a given. What we look for more than anything, going back to the nature of why Mad Hat was started, like we like to
Uh-huh.
wear many different hats. A huge component of that is like flexibility and thought.
Right.
And to be able to put on different hats of not skills, but of ways to think about projects.
Hmm.
That's what I look for more than anything when adding like any kind of talent. So
Right.
someone that who just happens to, for example, let's just say that someone is like, yeah, I edit, but I love getting on set. I would love to
Right.
hold the camera. I would love to direct some talent. It's that enthusiasm, I think, is more
Uh-huh.
representative of their mentality than it is
Right.
necessarily their skill set. And that's what we look for. And of course,
Yeah.
like I need someone to be able to put on a project and say, okay, like this is the project you dump your heart and soul into.
Right.
And this client is extremely trusting and doesn't have the vision themselves yet,
Uh-huh.
that now we need to bring it. And
Yeah.
so that's a hat to put on, where you might get another client that might like know exactly what they want.
Right.
And they might not be a quote unquote creative, but you can tell that they have like a really strong vision. And at
Yes.
that point, it's a slightly different hat you have to put on, and being able to, for an editor to intuitively understand that or be open to progressing towards that's what we look for. And you can apply that to editors, to
Yeah.
colors, to VFX, to producers, to writers. I think that's how we can survive as being a relatively small team
Yeah.
and be able to do high quality output across many different genres, many different clients, and in many different workflows.
Yeah, I love that way of putting it because, like you say, There's often, when students are studying this, they naturally have a focus on the technical skills that they need to acquire. And that is important. It's like you say, kind of like the table stakes for getting to the interview. But after that, it's all those other things that we try to encourage in terms of creativity, flexibility, adaptability, all those things.
Yeah, it's really important, and honestly, I think that anyone with the right attitude and the right mindset, like you could trust that mentality to pay off in so many different ways. That if they
Right.
don't know a program or they don't have experience with this type of thing, just give them time, and they will
Hmm.
quickly get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what are the future plans for ammunition?
So I didn't quite get to say this earlier. Moving over to an agency, I've worked with agencies my entire career.
Hmm.
And to be honest, and there's pros and cons to every business.
Yeah.
It's a different workflow. But what I've been the most impressed about working at an agency, specifically ammunition, is just the hunger
Mm.
and the drive for people to want to learn, to want to understand,
Right.
to want to play a role in like the process. And of
Right.
course, I could think any agency could say that, but from my perspective, the first time I'm at an agency,
Mm.
I feel it every day.
Mm.
And that really comes down to the leadership. Our CEO, Jeremy Heilpern, is just very, very open to experimentation. He's very open
Right.
to doing things differently.
Mhm.
Mad Hat brought on the acquisition of Mad Hat brought on a different type of client for the agency.
Right.
And, we've had a lot of entertainment background. We've worked with a lot of sports brands, things like
Mhm.
that. And so it's brought in a bit of a different flavor to the agency. And so I think the future plans for ammunition is to basically embrace that continual, like, hey, let's go out. Let's obviously maintain our clients.
Mhm.
Let's continue doing great work. Let's be innovative for
Right.
them. But let's also go out and be willing to try to work with all different types of people, different clients in different capacities. And what we were talking about earlier, that
Mhm.
it's where that goes, there needs to be some openness to it.
Right.
That could open us up into 5 years from now being a little bit of a different agency than we are now. But that flexibility of
Mhm.
thought really goes all the way up to our leadership. And I would say that whichever way ammunition goes in the future, that's what I know we will maintain, and that's what I look
Yeah.
forward to.
That sounds amazing. And so people wanna work with you, how do they get in touch?
Yeah, so we actually are on I hope I can say it now. We're in the middle of a soft launch right now, but we have a new website and launching a new brand, and all of our information is on there.
Awesome.
There's definitely contact information to reach out. I think we're a very human centric agency.
Mhm.
We love interpersonal conversations. So
Right.
if you reach out, we'll quickly get to a phone call and discuss. We've got a super talented team of excited people.
Excellent. I'll share a link to that in the description.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, Tim, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's exciting. I love what you're doing with your channel and your podcast and
Thanks
your
so much.
mission to want to share information, and please
Yeah.
continue doing.
Thanks so much. So, big theme of today's episode was embracing challenges. And that is such a huge aspect of being a content creator or entrepreneur, whether it comes to seizing new opportunities, overcoming creative roadblocks, or dealing with changes in markets and technologies. And right now, one of the biggest technological challenges for content creators and entrepreneurs over the last couple of years has been the development and dispersion of new AI technologies. I thought it was really interesting to hear how Jonathan and Ammunition were approaching AI technologies in that they certainly weren't shying away from it, but they were also being cautious in how they're adopting it. If I could sum it up, I'd say the recommendation is to use AI as an assistant together with your own research, insights, and experiences. And that's how you could use AI to supplement and deepen your ideation and research without losing what's unique to you and your perspectives as a content creator, and therefore to create content that, as Jonathan says, has emotional resonance with an audience. This lines up really well with what I recommended in an earlier episode on AI, which you can check out here. It goes into more detail about what the use of AI can look like as a content creator. Because I think as video creators, we need to adopt AI in today's environment to some extent in order to remain competitive. But that we also have to be very careful with how we're using it so we don't impact the quality of our content and also our reputation as content creators. And if you enjoy these videos, I've got 2 seasons worth of podcast content that you can check out in the links in the description for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.